think I'd been holding up pretty well, really. After all the trauma of the previous 3 days, we were all in a daze. Seeing Jesus die like that, in that horrible way, you would have thought we'd have all been in pieces. But to be honest, we were so stunned, it was difficult to feel anything. It was all over, and we couldn't take it in. One of our people had gone to Pilate and begged to be allowed to take Jesus' body down from the cross before Passover came in. It was a brave thing to do, and we were very grateful to Joseph. But by the time he got permission, all we had time to do was to wrap the body in a shroud and put him in Joseph's tomb, the one he had prepared for himself, I mean. Then we had to leave him there. I know it sounds stupid, but I really wasn't ready for that, just leaving him there. I mean, I hadn't been allowed to actually handle the body myself, and I couldn't get used to the idea that he was dead. I couldn't relate the coldness of death with the warm, vital, bursting with life person I knew Jesus to be. So when they rolled that stone across the entrance of the tomb, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that we were deserting him. The thought that we were just abandoning him to the darkness of the tomb and the cold of the night was overwhelming. I wanted to get him a blanket or something. I felt there ought to be something we could still do for him. It was his mother, Mary, who asked me if I'd come back with her to the tomb once the Passover was ended to prepare the body for burial properly. The thought that we could do that last thing for him was all that kept me going over the next couple of days. Without the thought that there was that one way left to honour him, I think I would have collapsed there and then. As it was, I couldn't wait for Jesus' mother and the rest of them. I decided to wait at the tomb until they arrived. So I got up early and went. I don't know what I thought I could really do on my own. That stone took 3 men to put it in place, so I wasn't going to shift it. But there you go. What law says that you have to be thinking straight 2 days after you've seen your best friend executed? I don't know one, but no doubt some dried-up old Pharisee somewhere will come up with an obscure verse from Leviticus to cover it. It was very early, but already you could sense that it was going to be a beautiful day. There was that hush you get at dawn, just before the sun leaps over the hills. But when I saw that gaping black hole where the stone should be, I knew something terrible had happened. I have to be honest and say that in some ways I was relieved when I realised the body was gone. You might wonder why. You see, I wouldn't have put it past some of Jesus' enemies to have desecrated his body in some way. So its disappearance was less of a shock than it might have been. All I could think of, though, was to get Simon Peter and the others and tell them what had happened, though I don't know what I thought he could do about it. At that time in his life, he wasn't a great one in the crisis, wasn't Simon? Liable to rush around in circles and lash out in all directions, if you follow me. Ask Malchus the high priest's servant if you don't believe me. Anyway, as soon as I told them the body was missing, off go Simon, Peter and John like they've got a whole Roman legion on their tails to check. Typical men they were. They wouldn't believe a woman until they'd seen it with their own eyes. I would have really run that whole distance, so I had no chance of keeping up with them. By the time I got back to the tomb, they'd already been inside it. Simon, Peter and John were sitting on the ground outside, staring at the grave cloth we'd wrapped Jesus in. I'd never seen Peter look so desolate, not ever, Not even when he crept back into the house in the early hours of Friday morning after they'd arrested Jesus. They just said, "He's gone, Mary," and wandered off out of the garden, almost dazed. It's funny, really, because it was when Simon said those words, "He's gone, Mary," that it really hit me, all that had happened over the last few days, and I knew that he really had gone, and it was us, we disciples, we human beings, who had failed him. We couldn't even bury him properly. We couldn't even get his funeral right. It was the last straw. It was all too much, and it just broke me up. I stood there, unable to move, and I cried. Actually, I didn't just cry, I howled. It was like it all welled up all at once, everything that had happened over the past few days. I couldn't have stopped for anyone. But eventually I heard a voice in front of me. Even as I cried, I thought, that's odd. I didn't hear them come. There were two men, and I think they were dressed in white, but to be honest, I couldn't have said for sure. My eyes were that full of tears. They asked me why I was crying. Well, I ask you, a woman standing outside a new tomb crying, what did they think I was crying for? Anyway, I told them. Before the two in front of me could answer, I heard another voice behind me. I thought he was the gardener. I was still weeping, you see, and still half blinded with tears. And when he asked the same question, I turned and held out the shroud to him and begged him. I begged him to tell me where Jesus was, if he knew, if it was him who'd taken the body away. By that stage, all my pride was gone. I would have begged the procurator himself to tell me if I thought he knew. He didn't answer, although in a way he did. He said my name, just the once. And quietly he said my name, and I knew it was him. It was him, Jesus. And he said my name, Mary. You know how the morning starts. You know how, even though it's still dark, there's a moment when the whole world seems to hold its breath, and then there's a pause as the dawn grows, and then the birds start to sing. Just a few at first, and then they all join in, and then everything seems to change in an instant, from deepest darkness to amazing light. Well, that's how it was, just like that. From darkest night to the most incredible dawn, and suddenly I was babbling and Jesus was talking and giving me a message for the others like he always did, and I was still crying. And then I was running, and even as I ran, still with the shroud in my hand, I was still crying. But this time there was no other way to express my joy. Just for a moment I wondered whether the others would believe me, but not for long. Inside my head, I could still hear his voice saying my name, Mary. And in a funny sort of way, I didn't care whether they believed me or not, because he had changed my world in an instant with one word. And I knew as I know now, that Jesus lives. And I danced as I ran.